Welcome into Courtside Seats with Kroeger, a Charlotte Hornets podcast. Here he is, Chris Kroeger.
Rolling on another episode of Courtside Seats, our Charlotte Hornets podcast, and we normally talk a lot of Hornets, but one of the fun things we get to do from time to time is kind of step outside the organization. We talk to some outside media folks, and I feel like now's a good time to do it, right? Like the opening month of the season is almost in the books already, which is crazy, and so we're going to welcome in a guy that I just love consuming his NBA coverage. So Dan Devine's with us from The Ringer. Dan, what's up, man? How you doing?
Things are going well. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, thanks for dropping by. And I'm still trying to get used to saying that because I always feel like I just want to say Yahoo Sports and Ball Don't Lie. But you've got a new job title. You got a new boss these days.
I'm not going to lie to you. It's tough, or it's still getting. I'm still getting used to it too. I'm used to hearing a certain rhythm whenever I'm sort of introduced on something. But the new digs are suiting me.
So take us back because it's been a few months now, but the end of last year you're still writing for Yahoo. So how did this whole thing come about? And for you, obviously, it's got to be similar, but it's probably more of a growth opportunity too for you professionally. So what's going on with you the last few months to take this step?
Sure. It wasn't something I was necessarily, hunting for. I was, the people at Yahoo were awesome to me for the entirety of my professional career, basically. I started with them freelancing in 2009. And they've been just, it was a great place to grow, a wonderful place to work, some incredible talent that went through there. And, being a part of that was, a privilege. But, Ringer approached me and sort of had some ideas for what I might be able to add to their coverage. And it seemed like a really cool opportunity for me to get to step back a little bit from the grind of doing, sort of multiple things every day and kind of feeling like your head's constantly on a swivel, to dig in a little bit on, maybe one big ticket idea a day, weekly column, that kind of thing. And it's been the early returns, I guess it's not really as for me to say whether the coverage has been any good, but the early returns from my end have been great. It's been a pleasure to work with a new group of people, sort of get a different perspective on what I can kind of bring to the table, and get to take a fresh look at the league from sort of a different vantage point than the one I've been with for the last handful of years.
No, so that kind of speaks to me. So everybody that has known me here in Charlotte, like I did my afternoon show for a while, and I think it was a bad secret to keep. Like if you listen to the show, sure, we talked a lot of NFL and Panthers and college hoops and college football, but I love basketball. And I grew up a Hornets fan. I grew up here on the Hornets before the Panthers, so obviously that was my passion. Like for you, that had to be similar to a certain regard with Yahoo. Is like, sure, you were writing for an NBA-centric blog, but that was just one silo underneath all the other different things that Yahoo is doing from a sports coverage standpoint. And like you said, you're churning stuff out all the time. So now to be at the Ringer, where your sole job is, basically being one of their head guys to just talk NBA, and we all know how much Bill Simmons loves the NBA, right? So like that's just got to be refreshing, right? To be in a place where it's like the pace is slowed down, and now you really get to kind of dive deep into the sport you love so much.
Yeah, it's been a really great opportunity, and it's really funny to see. You talk about the different hats that people have on, or the different focal points that a company can have. Like we're having conversations in our sort of internal, chats and, messaging back and forth about, nitty gritty NBA stuff, the ceiling for Dennis Smith Jr.,
right.
What people think about Malik Monk, et cetera. And then like I go and I'm writing about the NBA, and then Bill is going and interviewing Matt Damon, so different worlds, slightly different worlds we're occupying. But yeah, I mean, the passion for the league at our site is, I think it's palpable. I think you get a sense when you read our stuff, when you listen to the podcasts, you watch the videos, all of it, that it comes from a place of people really loving the NBA and we sort of in all its messiness and glory and all the fun stuff that can happen night to night. And getting to a point where I'm able to dig into some of those smaller things while also putting it into the context of the big picture of the league, it's a big challenge, but it's also a pretty great opportunity, and I'm really happy to get to do it here.
I'm going to ask you a very, I don't know, what should I say here, a very esoteric question here about NBA coverage. Okay, you ready?
Go for it.
So I being an NBA junkie, obviously, I this is my job now professionally. Same for you. I find that the consumers of our sport, our fans, which are the lifeblood of our sport, I feel like the way they consume our league compared to other fans who consume other leagues, even the NFL, which we can all agree is the biggest sport in this country still. That's not changing, at least anytime in the near future. It's different, right? Like NBA fans consume our sport in a different way, and now we're able to give them content, more meaningful content that they want, better than we ever have before. And so I ask you, why do you think that is, right? Like, why are fans of the NBA not just wanting, I mean, they love the highlight reel plays, that's great too, but they also now want more advanced deep dives into what's going on the court and why it's happening. That contextualization, I feel like, doesn't go on in other sports. Maybe I'm saying that just because we're in it, but why do you think that is, in your opinion, that fans consume our sport the way it is?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that there's an opportunity in what we do to go. You can kind of go two directions, right? You can go wider and broader screen, kind of like try to get as big a picture view of the league as it exists as possible, or you can go deeper, sort of drill further down on the specific lineup combinations and which players are more likely to go left off a screen than right, and all these sorts of really minute details on individual players, on player combinations, on lineups, on scheme. And I think that there's just what I've found sort of wonderful about the NBA, the model of coverage as it exists now, and the advancing number of people who do it really well, sort of across the board, and the appetite for it is people want everything. They want the wide scope on every team, and they want the deep dive on every team. And I think why exactly people sort of have gravitated to that in terms of NBA coverage, I wonder if part of it is just because of the sort of personalities involved. And so you have like an easy entry point to get to know some of the players, some of the the talent that's there. You're not separated by helmets and pads and everything. You're seeing people sort of laid bare individually. So you have there's a personal connection to that. And then when you watch sort of the 10 people moving around the court at any given time, you become sort of more intently aware that there are relationships there. There's personal relationships, but there's also how those guys interact play to play as they move all over the court. And so then you kind of want to see, well, that guy and that guy seem to have some real chemistry. Is that true? How did that develop? Right. And then you want to hear about the reporting of how those guys have worked on that chemistry, how that manifests in terms of the way they run the two-man game, or whether they look for one another more frequently than their teammates do. And there's sort of this ability to take the one thing you notice and then build out a full sort of picture of what those relationships look like, player to player, person to person. And I think that's what sort of makes doing this a lot of fun for me, is there's sort of no end to that. I do a weekly column called The 5 Most Interesting Teams in the NBA This Week, and somebody right away, the first issue of that column, somebody said, "Are you going to be able to find 5 interesting teams every week for the whole season?" Yeah. It's a long season, man. And my immediate reaction was, yeah, because there's always something. Whether it's a good team, a bad team, somewhere in the middle, there's always something worth taking a deeper look at. There's always something worth scratching the surface on a little bit more. A player, a relationship, a lineup, all that kind of stuff. And I think the fact that the presence of that stuff and the appetite for it kind of gives me the opportunity to get to do what I'm doing in a sort of a more fun way.
I think 2 things here. First of all, let's just say we've got the smartest fans in sports, right? NBA fans are the smartest fans in sports. I think we can say that.
I'm biased, but I tend to agree.
Okay, so we'll put that out there. And then the other thing is, too, and I say this because I've seen it. I don't know about you and your other coverage covering sports before, but like I've seen this up close and personal. Just the different dynamics inside an NBA building compared to, let's say, for example, an NFL building where, I think it's much harder to get the why, right? The contextualization of, hey, I've noticed this is happening, or hey, I think this is happening. Numbers say this is happening. Can you explain the why to me? And whether you're asking a GM or a coach or a player in the NFL, I think so often there's brushback, right? Or there's this wall that's built up of, oh, no. Those are state secrets. We don't want to let you know the why. We just want you to know that it is happening and it's intentional. Whereas with the NBA, I always feel like you can ask the why, whether it's a player, a coach, a front office exec, whoever it is. Hey, I've noticed this, to your point, like I've noticed this 5-man lineup out on the court together. Here's a trend I'm seeing. Why is that? What's happening there? And you almost always get an answer. Maybe somebody isn't always the most accommodating, but almost at the end of the day, almost certainly somebody's willing to explain the why to you. And I feel like just that wall that's built up of the NBA of, hey, yeah, we want to share, we want to inform, we want everybody to understand the game better, compared to, like, say, a sport like the NFL. It's just night and day to me. But our sport is very accommodating as to try to, grow the game and help everybody understand. I don't feel like people say, oh, well, you're a media member, I don't want you to understand what's going on in the court. No, they want everybody to be, more intelligent about what's going on the floor at all times, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something to that. You've got, even some players that will, that might be, reticent to engage with the media on some storylines or at some times or whatever. And some, front offices that do have a little bit more of a wall in terms of what they're willing to let out versus what's proprietary. I think in general, when you break all that down, you get to people talking ball. Like they want to. So these are experts at what they do, and they want to help share. They want to share their expertise. They like Kevin O'Connor, one of my colleagues, did this wonderful story with Klay Thompson, where if you just sat down with Klay Thompson to talk about the challenge of going for another championship, I'm sure Klay Thompson would have glazed over and given him sort of the same 5-word quotes that he would give to somebody else. But he wanted to talk about positioning, how you work off screens, how you move off the ball. Let's watch a little bit of tape, and can you walk me through what's going on here, how you do what you do? And it was like, a eureka moment. Curtains part, sunlight streams through, because Klay Thompson wants to sit and talk about that stuff all day. It's his life's work to some degree to this point, and it's the thing that has made him so special at what he is, and something that's so frankly frequently often overlooked. So I think there's something to that. The idea that there are a lot of little things that go into the big things that we see, and we maybe don't always get to understand what they are. And people are more or less pretty interested in sharing some of the, what goes into making the sausage on those things night to night.
All right, let's talk some big picture NBA, because we're almost a month into the season already, which is getting kind of crazy. I just don't even know where time goes sometimes. And so I think a lot of people are probably maybe mildly surprised at the leap, at least in terms of how quickly it happened with Bud in Milwaukee. I think that's been an early season storyline with Giannis in Milwaukee, maybe finally reaching all the expectations that people have had for them over the last couple of years. They've been a fun team to watch. Toronto, I was always on the Toronto hype train even before Kawhi stepped on the court, because I just thought this is going to work. Early returns say that's working. Golden State's been incredible. Denver has picked up where they left off at the end of last season, and now they've hit another gear. And then we've gotten some teams that, obviously, like Washington, Houston. OKC was a little slow out of the gates. Now they feel like they're rounding into form, but you got Westbrook, who's a little dinged up. But what are the biggest surprises, good or bad, I guess, for you through the early part of the season?
I think the struggles in Houston have been, on the negative side of that. They're starting to put it together now that they've got Harden, Paul, and Capella back on the floor for a longer stretch. But the struggle that they kind of had right off the rip defensively was, that was a team that won 65 games last year that we all sort of broadly expected to be right back in the thick of things. And seeing them sort of stumble off the line, I think, was sort of a surprise and a bit of a disappointment. On sort of the other end of that spectrum, that Denver has a defense like that.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
The Nuggets have been an offense first team for several years now, and if they, there was that sense that's why they brought in Paul Millsap last offseason. That's why they sort of wanted to build toward a more balanced roster if they could. It was not there for them last year, in part because of Millsap's health and in part because of the development of all their young guys. But if they're even an average defense, they're probably a 50-plus win team. And in the early going, they're not just average; they're like top 5. Yep. They're getting stops. They held the Warriors under 100 points in that sort of eye-opening early season win, and they've kept that up. I think if there's sort of a parlor game that you play with people when you talk about the NBA. It's who is the second best team in the West, and the sort of dirty little secret in the first couple weeks is there might not be a second best team in the West because everybody's in that same kind of pack. But if Denver is able to keep up what it's been doing on the defensive end, I think that makes them a heck of a lot more interesting in the long haul, and maybe a more dangerous team, not just to make the playoffs, but to make some noise once they get there.
Yeah, and Portland, I think, obviously they got hot at the end of last season and kind of quietly crept into that third spot, and I think there's always questions about about, for whatever reason, I don't know. I think people always wonder what is Portland, what are they going to be, because it's always Dame and CJ and Nurkic, and then it's just a bunch of other guys that kind of revolve around them. But, I mean, Portland's been really impressive, I think, too, through the early portion of the schedule, and they're quietly kind of hanging around in that top 4 shelf of the West right now.
Absolutely. I wrote about them as sort of one of the teams that, maybe the best team nobody's talking about. Obviously it's still early in the season and your mileage may vary on those sorts of things. A lot of people are understandably skeptical of Portland because their lasting image of the Blazers was a team that just got smoked in the first round of the playoffs. It's one thing to win 49 games. It's another one to not be able to even get off the, sort of out of the blocks in the postseason. And I think that there's some skepticism that what they're doing now will be able to translate come April and May. I understand that, but I mean, all you can do is play the schedule, and all you can do is try to build your case. And in the early going, they're a team that Lillard continues to be, maybe the best thing out this side of Steph Curry in terms of, sort of the pull-up threes and the deep range and the way that sort of distorts a defense. With the, all due respect to the guy that you got there in North Carolina. The seeing them sort of take another step forward defensively, the growth of that second unit, Evan Turner being more, sort of more comfortable as that sort of point forward off the bench, and guys like Nick Stauskas and Seth Curry getting a chance to kind of rejuvenate their careers, and Terry Stotts' flowing offense. There's sort of the pieces seem to fit and make sense in a way that maybe they didn't all last year. So I think there's reason to be excited about what's going on in Portland, even if you're understandably saying maybe pump the brakes there. But I think that's what's so fun to me about the early season so far is I think there have been fewer big disappointments in the early going and more sort of reasons to be excited. And I think that that's broadly true on sort of in both conferences as you go looking, trying to figure out who the top 8 are going to be and, which teams sort of have staying power moving forward.
Can we give L.A., and I'm talking about the Clippers here, not the Lakers, but can we give the Clippers some credit? Because I love what they've done to kind of, because I think teams have struggled to do this, which is to satisfy both things at the same time, which is think about the future while also maintaining competitiveness now. And Shea, again, kind of like what's interesting to me, Dan, is like you look at the 2 trades that happened in the lottery on draft night with Luka and Trey, right, with Dallas and Atlanta. Both sides appear to be happy there. It might be a trade where both teams win. And then I think the same thing maybe with us here in Charlotte and with the Clippers with Myles and Shea, right, where both teams maybe got their guy and both teams are happy, and it's just a trade that works for both parties. But I love what the Clippers have. Their bench mob's ridiculous. Obviously, Beverly being back out there is so important to them. And Tobias Harris, I feel like, is the volume scorer that always gets forgotten in the NBA. And look at the Clippers through the early going.
Yeah, absolutely. They're somewhat surprisingly right up around the top in the top 10 in both points scored per possession and points allowed per possession. I think that that's something that you probably wouldn't have predicted heading into the season. I think they were pegged to finish something like 11th in the West, 36 wins. And, the strong start for them, it's an indicator of the depth of talent. They don't have that. That star caliber player that they're looking to be able to go get in free agency as they, work their salary cap. But they go 10-11 deep with guys who can play. And, I think they love what they're seeing out of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a part of that second unit there where they get, you can throw him out there with Lou Williams and Milos Teodosic, and you've got playmaking. You've got multiple guys who can break somebody down off the dribble, multiple guys who can shoot. There's a variability and a variety to the way they can play that they're not going to knock you out with their overwhelming starting lineup, but they're going to come at you in waves and make it tough on you and be able to take advantage of defenses in a few different ways. And yeah, I mean sometimes there are opportunities for teams to get well in the present while setting themselves up for the future without it being necessarily one team gets ripped off or one team's fleeced. And I think you're right to note that might have been a situation there in Los Angeles and Charlotte, because I'll tell you, every time I watch the Hornets, I'm like my eyes magnetized to Myles Bridges. It is awfully tough to not pay attention to what he's doing and to feel like he might not be commanding a heck of a lot more minutes as the season goes on.
Yeah, I want to talk about that again in a little bit, and I guess the other question too is we'll wrap up the West and then we'll look to the East really quick. I mean, you look at Houston, Utah, the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Timberwolves all right now, like at times in the early portions, again, it's very, very early, but those 5 teams that I think people would have said maybe definitively at least 3, if not 4, of those would have been playoff teams at the time the season's over. Like, in your mind, how many of those teams actually go on to make the playoffs? When you're looking at Houston, Utah, Lakers, New Orleans, and Minnesota, they've all been on the wrong side of the cut line early on. Like, this, it's fascinating to watch. Like, there's just going to be good teams in the West who don't make the playoffs. Like, I think it's just as simple as that this year.
Absolutely. I think there is broadly skepticism about, say the Kings, who have gotten off to a really good start, them holding that up, or the Grizzlies, who are about to get into a real rough patch of their schedule and haven't been, as positive in their minutes as you'd like with Conley and Gasol on the floor together, but have still, been able to, to get out to a stronger start. Whether those teams can keep it up and fend off some of those sort of more blue blood teams that have the higher end talent. But I mean, I'm bullish on Houston being able to get it back together now that they've got their sort of big 3 back on the court. They still have some stuff to figure out on the wing and how they build out their rotation. But I think as long as they've
back,
got,
by the way, too, they backed the Brinks truck up to get Bizdelic back to fix the defense. It's funny how that one worked too.
I think that is a very smart decision to have made. Everything was working a heck of a lot better last year than it seemed to the beginning of this year with those switches. So I think bring it into the mechanic and let him take a look at it is a good idea to me. Utah, we saw a couple of years ago the Miami Heat team in the East, right? That had that massive run at the second half of the season, 30-11 to finish the year, and sort of expected, well, that's going to carry over. And it hasn't. They sort of plateaued a little bit. I'm not so sure that's exactly what we're going to see in Utah because they had that sensational run last year. I think you expect big things for Donovan Mitchell, and defense tends to translate year over year, especially with a group as talented and versatile as what the Jazz have. But in an NBA that's sort of tilting more towards scoring and away from lockdown defenses, you wonder if they might continue to have a difficult time finding their footing. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There's going to be a couple of really good teams on the outside looking in, which then of course means that they're going to wind up in the lottery, and then maybe even stronger competition in the years to come.
And then you look at the East, and I mean, I think everybody's just shocked with Washington right now. Like, what's going on? What's happened? Explain to everybody, I guess, as best as you can figure out what's going on with the Wizards so far.
It just seems like a team that is in need of an overhaul. I mean, I'm not in that locker room. I don't, but the people that I know that are and that have spent some time with them, including John Gonzalez at our site when they went out on their West Coast trip, describe it as like no one seems happy. No one seems like they're really in a positive frame of mind right now. The things have ticked up for them a bit since Dwight Howard got back. They were the worst defensive rebounding team in the league, I believe, with him out, not in the lineup. So he helps in that capacity. Another sort of big body screen and roll threat. To create some easy baskets maybe is something that would be helpful for giving their offense some more shape. But it just seems like the center can't really hold between John Wall about to enter his Supermax extension, Bradley Beal having basically taken the reins as the best player on that team, and Otto Porter being a max guy who continues to be the third option. But maybe is it because he's not looking for his own stuff as frequently? Is it because they're not looking for him as frequently? Just the mix does not seem to be conducive to a positive environment. And when you get off to a rough start, those things can snowball and get away from you a little bit. They've got an opportunity here to make some headway against a soft spot in the schedule, but if they don't, and it's already looking pretty rough for them, that thing could get a whole heck of a lot worse before it gets any better. Yeah,
and their defense is in disarray too. I mean, and this is a one-game sample, so I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill on this, but I looked at like the first game that Dwight came back on that Friday night where he had 20, he was 7 of 8 from the field. I think he had 7 or 8 rebounds. So you saw him, right, in that, and you see it and you say, oh, Dwight played well, right? I think he hit his first 5 shots of the game that night. And then I went and looked at their defensive rating when Dwight was on the court. I don't know if you did this. What do you think the defensive rating for the Wizards was when Dwight was on the court in that first game back?
Oh, I couldn't hazard a guess.
143. So, I mean, and that's where I say it's a one-game sample. Like, I'm aware of that. But that has been, I think we saw it here last year a little bit, is Dwight is just not the same rim protector that he's been in years past. And that's just because he's been in the league for a long time. And that's not a knock on him or anything. But I think that's the other thing with Washington right now is, their defense seems to be a major issue. And then, you talk about, like, the locker room situation. I saw the quotes from, who was it? It was Austin Rivers the other day. And Austin was saying, we just started the game really cool. And he said, but there's nothing cool about losing, and there's nothing cool about taking L's. And I think that kind of, if you're going to get a quote to sum up, I think the Wizards' start to the season this year, I think that's it, because I think you've heard, like, on the record, John Wall, now Austin Rivers, guys saying that it seems some people maybe are just complacent with what's going on and going through the motions. But, that's, to your point, that's how things kind of snowball. And next thing you know, you're in a hole that's going to be really hard to climb out of, perhaps.
Absolutely. And, you're right. I think that there's a tendency, it's hard to rate Dwight. And I'm sure that, you guys got a good sense of that when he was in Charlotte, because you look at the production and it's like, well, double-doubles every night, capable of doing something still as remarkable as a 30-30. When he blocks the shots and woofs, it's, it looks really good. But the impact in terms of his ability to lock down the paint, deter drivers, get out and defend in space against pick and rolls, it's just not what it used to be. And that, that comes for everybody, especially with age and injury, over the years. But I think that there is is he washed up? No, I don't think so. I think he can still make a positive impact. But can he be the kind of game-changing defensive force that he was, when he was winning those Defensive Player of the Year awards and before things sort of started to tail off for him after his time in LA and Houston? I think that's going to be a tougher sell. And the Wizards need as transformative of a piece on not just on defense, but everywhere. They need transformation everywhere, and it looks like it's going to be in short supply unless at least a few guys there seem to get religion about what needs to happen for the team.
And at the top of the East, I trust Boston and Brad Stevens are going to figure it out, because their offense is a work in progress right now. So I know they've just been pretty good. Not great. They've been pretty good out of the gates, that tells you the expectations they have. Milwaukee's been phenomenal. The Raptors have been phenomenal. I legitimately think, I don't know if this will happen, Dan, but I legitimately think if Toronto and Milwaukee keep playing to their expectations and keep getting better, which they should, and Boston figures out everything they've got going on, there are legitimately three teams that if they were to match up with Golden State in the NBA Finals, I'd love to see it. I think any of those three teams would be fun to watch and could create an interesting matchup with Golden State, even though everybody always seems to say, well, nobody's got a chance. I'd love to see any one of those three teams give them a shot in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I think that from the Warriors' perspective, they seem to have the healthiest respect in the early going for Boston, and I wonder if part of that is just because they've seen Kyrie Irving in a finals up close and personal and know what he's capable of in terms of shot creation against their defense locked in the biggest moments. But the depth of Toronto is kind of staggering. Yeah. Getting Kawhi Leonard back as a legitimate number one player and a potential MVP candidate on both ends of the floor is obviously hugely important. It's why they swung for the fences in that deal and were willing to part with a player as good as DeMar DeRozan to do it. But it's the full depth of the roster. It's that they can play big. They can play big with Valanciunas and Ibaka. They can play small through Pascal Siakam, who's an advancing guy that a lot of people are sort of paying more attention to now. That OG Anunoby is still sort of working his way back. Danny Green has been phenomenal for them. Fred VanVleet in the backcourt. They've got ball handling and shooting and defense and rebounding seemingly everywhere. And if you're going to be able to match up with, if you're going to try to match up with the Warriors, you're going to need as many wings and as many guys who can do as many things as possible as you can throw at them. And I think that makes Toronto and Boston both with their complement of players really interesting. And then, there aren't many teams where they would be able to go into a series against the Warriors and maybe have the best guy on the floor. Right. but Giannis might be one of those guys, man. Yeah. It's phenomenal to watch him play and to watch him getting to play in space in Mike Budenholzer's system there. How long that keeps up, but everybody bombing threes, everybody taking shots at the rim, and everybody D'ing up has made Milwaukee, an instant contender. And I think you're right. It would be a pretty fascinating matchup to watch down the line.
Yeah, Bud might be the signing of the summer, right? Like player or coach or anything. Budenholzer to Milwaukee might be the deal of the summer.
It was a fascinating to see. They did make some tactical. Obviously, the tactical decisions that Bud made in terms of changing their roster or their scheme, but also they bring in Brook Lopez, they bring on Ersan Ilyasova, guys who can play that stretch five and just play 5 out. Let Giannis get downhill in all that acres of space. And now, similar to what I was saying with Toronto, like you have a lot of guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. A lot of guys you trust to make decisions. Whether those are all going to be guys who hold up in the crucible of the postseason remains to be seen. You want to see, a longer track record of success and positive play in the postseason from guys like Eric Bledsoe or Malcolm Brogdon. But Chris Middleton is the real deal. Giannis has been phenomenal, and I think that there's a sense that they would be able to at least counterpunch and make the tit for tat adjustments that you might need to do in the course of a 7-game series. They might be better equipped for that now with Budenholzer at the controls than they have been in the past.
All right, we'll talk some Hornets, and this is crazy to say for a lot of folks. Even the most ardent fans, and I'm the eternal optimist, there's not a bigger Hornets fan in the entire earth than me. But if you had told me almost a month into the season the Hornets would be a team that is hanging around the fringes of being top 10 in offensive and defensive rating in the NBA, I would have said, are you sure about that? Those words just come out of your mouth. And not only that the Hornets have mostly throughout the first month of the season packed one of the 2 to 3 best offenses in the NBA out on the court as well. What's happening? What's going on with our Hornets right now? This is pretty impressive.
Oh, this is where I also have to, offer a mea culpa here. In my old gig at Yahoo, heading into the season, I did something called the Fun Bad Team Power Rankings. And I, in part out of deference, because I wasn't sure that they were going to be that bad, but also I said that I think I was, did not find the Hornets to be a particularly fun team. I didn't see how the roster was going to shake out to make them a fun watch. Felt like there was a lot leaning on Kemba and a lot leaning on the young guys sort of taking a big step. And I'm here to say I was 180 degrees wrong on that. I'm having a lot of fun watching the Hornets this season, in part because of sort of the stylistic things that Coach Borrego has put into place, where he's going to, instead of saying we have all these big guys, we got to play them all, he's saying, well, forget about that. We're going to get small as often as possible. We're going to rely on Michael Kidd-Gilchrist to be basically a small ball center. We're going to, invert roles with him and Willy Hernan-Gomez. We're going to, if night to night, our bigs are not our best bet to put up points, then we're just not going to use them. We're going to rely on our threes to play up as fours. We're going to play our threes, our twos up as threes, and we're going to get more ball handling on the floor. It's been, the acres of space that Kemba Walker now has to work with have turned him from a legitimate all-star into like a fringe MVP candidate in terms of the way he's been able to step into his open shots and produce and wreak havoc. Tony Parker, you talk about Coach Bud being one of the, maybe the biggest value signings of the summer. Tony Parker is not far off that list, averages, close to 20 and 10 per 36 minutes, being able to bump Kemba off the ball, as necessary. And, even like as a screen setter and somebody that can get Kemba going downhill, the Hornets have been much more creative to watch in the early going than I expected them to. And I think the result has been both a pleasing style to follow night to night, and also some real problems for opposing defenses to have to figure out and to try to solve. Sustaining that as you get into the guts of the season is going to be the bigger challenge, especially if the roster sort of lines up as such that you're not playing the bigger guys as often, so that you're leaning harder on the wings and the guards, and do those guys start to get fatigued. But I think it's the early returns have been in terms of what James Borrego has brought stylistically and culturally, and the way that the Hornets players have responded to it has been nothing short of fantastic.
And I give you this: I'm also the president of the Kemba Walker fan club. I lead his stats and research and development department as well. So I'm always looking up the best and most creative Kemba Walker stats. I love this one. Okay, I unearthed this one a little while ago. He's now north of 700 made 3-point field goals since the beginning of the 2015-16 season, which is really when his emergence as one of the top-tier point guards in the NBA started, right? Because that's when the three-point ball was really added and weaponized in his arsenal. And so he's got 700-plus threes made since the beginning of that season. There are only 3 other guys in the NBA to make that, or 4 other guys in the NBA to make that many since this stretch, and it's Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, James Harden, Damian Lillard, and only Steph and Klay have made that many while shooting 38% or better from 3, which is what what Kemba's done as well. And I mean, I think most of the country knows now, Dan, right? Like, this is one of the most lethal volume range shooters, pick and roll point guards as well. Now he's adding finishing at the rim to his game. He gets to the free throw line with high frequency. Like, Kemba is a modern elite scorer in today's NBA.
Absolutely. And, even the things that would be sort of dings on his game where you'd say, well, he's a smaller point guard who's going to be able to get, opposing offenses are going to be able to pick on him on the defensive end. You can't control height, you can't control size, but he competes. He's smart. He executes. He goes out there and goes after. When he's switched on, he goes after it and attacks it. When he's, has the challenge of holding up one-on-one against opposing scorers, he tries to meet it. There might be no better player development story over the last half decade or so than what Kemba Walker has turned himself into in Charlotte, and what the Hornets have, given him the opportunity to grow into. And, the result is, obviously, there are constant questions about, the future and, what free agency might hold and so on and so forth. But, Kemba Walker would be the kind of guy I would feel very comfortable making a building block of my franchise moving forward, because the game that he plays with his savvy, his guile, his ball handling, and that range shooting now, that translates. Now, what remains to be seen in terms of how the things shake out for Mitch Kupchak, and what the pecking order needs to be moving forward. That we'll see how that comes to play down the line. But Kemba has been sensational and shouldered that load of being the best player on the team, transitioning through a couple of different sort of periods in Hornets history. And still, and not only just being there, but getting better throughout it, and being somebody that you can hang an offense around. It's been fantastic to watch, and I think you're seeing this season the best version of him that we've seen yet.
Couple of quick things that we'll let you go. Malik Monk is a guy that's been really interesting, because obviously he was picked 11th overall last year, and high expectations there always are for any lottery pick. And I think he was the first to admit the season just didn't go the way he would have expected it to, and that's for a variety of reasons. And yet he was here all summer working. And I think Tony Parker has been the greatest thing that's happened to Malik in a short year plus in the NBA. And to watch the calming influence of him, Malik looks engaged. And for anybody that thought maybe he was just a shooter, I think you're starting to see the glimpses, and it's happened through the first month of the season or so, where he's a much more dynamic player than that. And when he gets downhill and attacks the basket to either finish above the rim or create open looks as he collapses the defense for his teammates and starts to become more of a creator, Malik, I think you're starting to see, wow, this guy, much like you talked about perhaps with a Lou Williams, could Malik become that sixth man type of player that are so hard to find in the NBA? But I think we're starting to see glimpses of that from him too.
Absolutely. He's 20 years old, that's the thing. I feel like it's so hard to remember sometimes that, guys that are not going to, be 21 until near the end of their second season in the NBA, or if, even further than that. So as guys come in younger and younger, it's going to take a little while, especially on defense, especially if you're somebody who is, sort of more of an offense first player. You've got to figure out how to stay on the floor and how to manage to, contribute, even if you're not the focal point of the offense, as you've been for most of your life to that point. So seeing the steps that he's made, his improving efficiency from the floor, the confidence that, not that anybody was ever concerned that he didn't have the confidence that he could put up buckets, but to continue to shoot, knowing that his role is going to be to space the floor, to provide that attacking punch off the bench, and the willingness to continue to try to make plays. He's up to, I believe, about 4 assists per 36 minutes of floor time. He's not going to be a primary playmaker. He's going to share the floor with Parker or with Kemba, often with both, or sometimes with both of them. We've seen that late in games, that look more often. But to be able to be a complementary player, to be able to make, come off a pin down, get the ball, and sort of head downhill. Those are the kinds of things that young players need some time to figure out how to do at the next level. But the skill is there, the confidence is there, and listen, if you're, if the sort of the model as you move forward is somebody like Jamal Crawford or Lou Williams, I think there are worse places to start, and I think that Monk might have the capacity to even be more than that as he continues to develop. And
then Myles, I mean, this guy is a grown man, and this is, by the way, can we say this? This is why it's so hard to do the facsimile, right? Of like, oh, this is what this guy was in college. Here's what he projects to be in the NBA. Myles with Jaren Jackson last year kind of had his role, I wouldn't say reduced, but changed, right? And I think because of that, his game looked different in his sophomore season. He probably would have been a definite top 10, maybe top 5 pick 2 drafts ago if he came out as a freshman. And now, I mean, the Hornets might have gotten a steal at 12 to get Myles Bridges, and his game is already so mature, and wait till everything clicks. And, I mean, the explosiveness he has as an athlete, I don't think I didn't see anybody writing about that during the pre-draft process, and it's been on full display. Like you said, every time you watch a Hornets game, he pops. You feel him out on the court, and it's just a sight to behold for the Hornets right now.
Absolutely. The ability to turn defense to offense, the ability to, he rebounds cool. Like, who rebounds cool? There are these things where, and even already, still, so early into his career, the ability to bring things to the table without taking stuff away. He's not turning the ball over a ton. He's finishing the chances that he gets. He can make a play in the open court, but he's not going to try to do something that is, sort of beyond his ken at this point. A guy that, 6'7", 225, but looks to me like he can be able to defend, 2-3 positions at least. Mm-hmm. And, maybe, as we talked about earlier, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist now moving into sort of like a power forward, small ball center kind of role. I can envision Myles Bridges playing sort of similar positionally too. That looks like the sort of a modern small ball 4, especially we'll see as his shot develops and as he gets a little bit more comfortable playing in space on the floor. I think the sky's the limit for what he can be, but the combination that he has of size, physicality, and that, that sort of explosive athleticism, it's going to give him, chances to succeed. And, that he's already 10 games into his career averaging about 20 minutes a game speaks to the need for, quality wing play, the value of having guys who can fill a few different roles. And also, I think the fact that he's already earned the trust of James Borrego and that coaching staff. And I would expect that, that number, that minutes, the minutes number, the touches, the opportunities to only increase as the season goes on, because it looks like, maybe you're seeing that more and more with players coming out of the college ranks, where guys on good teams don't always get the chance to show everything they can do. And then they come into a game that's faster, that's spaced better, where more people can shoot and find you if you get yourself open, and all of a sudden they take off. He seems to me like a guy that could be very one of those candidates to do just that.
Dan Devine from TheRinger.com, The Ringer NBA. You can follow them on Twitter. He's on Twitter at YourManDevine. And I just want the record to show that you were a bigger man than most would be, and you said, you know what, I was wrong on the Hornets. They're fun, they're good, and I'm here for it. So I appreciate that. Okay, above everything else.
It's my pleasure. Like, listen, if you can't admit when you were wrong, you're never going to learn something new. And I think that's kind of the most fun part about the league right now, is it's teaching you new stuff every night. So it's as long as it winds up being a fun watching experience, I'm more than happy to say that I got one wrong. So thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. And you have to check out every Wednesday. It's his 5 most interesting teams in the NBA, drops every Wednesday, every week. And as he puts awesome Twitter description in his Twitter bio, he bombs atomically for The Ringer. So check it out, TheRinger.com, and you can see that every Wednesday. Dan, it's a pleasure to talk to you, man. Thanks for the time.
Oh, my pleasure.
That's going to do it for us. Another episode of Courtside Seats, our Charlotte Hornets podcast. We appreciate Dan Devine dropping by, formerly of Yahoo. Ball Don't Lie. Now he's with The Ringer, all their great NBA coverage. Kevin O'Connor's another guy that churns out some great work. Bill Simmons, everything he's put together over there at The Ringer. So we appreciate him stopping by, and check out his weekly column that comes out. 5 most interesting teams in the NBA every week, every Wednesday. Hornets were featured not all that long ago, so go check that out and support him. Appreciate him making time for us. If you've missed any of our previous episodes of Courtside Seats, you can find us in Apple Podcasts. You just search Courtside Seats. You can search my name, Kroeger, Kroeger, or you can find us on YouTube, our Charlotte Hornets YouTube channel. Search Charlotte Hornets to find us there. Subscribe. You'll get all of our great video content, including our Courtside Seats podcast that's updated every week. Or you can find us wherever podcasts are available. You'll find us by just searching for the podcast name, and make sure you subscribe. You'll get pushed all the new episodes every time we debut. We'll see you guys back here again next Monday, another edition of Courtside Seats.